and that is why I'm here. Slides you can see later, but get your feedback is the important part. So if you'll excuse me, I start with the next presentation. Negotiations is like this quite often. At least that is in the people's mind. People think that negotiation is a big fight. And I hope that in the negotiation tips that I gave you before, it can be another way. It can be constructive. It should be a win-win environment that you strive for. And in the most ideal situation, of course, you're aiming for partnerships and marriage. But beware that negotiations can be a fight. And contracts are there to prevent that. And the contracts really should be looked into detail. There's one more slide on really tips and challenges that you should be aware of, and I leave this out of the discussion for the time being. Just have a look at those, because these are issues that are coming quite often during these fights in the negotiations. Ownership, access rights, user rights. And actually, I will have a part of the session tomorrow will go much more in detail on practical examples. From, okay, what does that mean, access rights? Why is that important for a university? Why is it important to have user rights? What does that mean in practice? So that will be covered in the presentation tomorrow. If you have very pertinent questions, please grill me after the presentation, because then I can share a lot with you. But we proceed here. As a question mark checklist, if you like, have you thought about these issues before actually entering in a large contract? And don't forget this one. If something happens, who bears the risk? Who bears the burden? And that is your role as leaders in the universities to take care of. That not only a lawyer, but you as a university governor, manager, director, thinks about the risk involved in signing up to something. Liability becomes more and more important. So it's not just a legal story, it's an organization and management story. And the legal story is only to protect your rights in a contract and lay that down and limit the risk. But the most important decisions are in your head before and linked to your strategy. Okay, just a glimpse on what happens after you transfer knowledge to an industry partner. That's a long road. Developing a medical drug is even the longest you can imagine. It's up to 14, 15 years. And the first idea of a medical drug that works in the laboratory is just the very, very first step. After that, the industry partners have to do a long, long path. And I had the advantage of going through that whole path once. So I know which are steps ahead of you. In principle, most of this is important for all product development to some extent. Some of the elements are more important in some sectors and for certain products, and others are less important. But actually, most of these elements are all coming back, and you need support there. This is why the larger consortia are constructed, so that the researchers can take care of this part, and the other partners can take care of this part. Division of roles and tasks. Okay, this is a free help desk service, and I will come back on that tomorrow, but just to give it to you, there is a free help service giving you free advice. Even if you're not participating in EU projects, you can ask them for help, and they will give you, within 3 working days, free advice in 6 languages. You can ask your question in Portuguese if you like. There is a frequent asked questions database here that is very, very rich. So many of the questions that you are struggling with, you might find a solution there. These are lawyers, very experienced lawyers behind the help desk. They will not defend you in court, but they will give you the way and the kind of questions that you should ask your lawyer. So it's extremely valuable, and it's free. And also this, the Lambert agreements that you can see here are very well known in the Commonwealth as standard or model agreements that give you a good start. A materials transfer agreement, a confidentiality agreement, a partnership agreement, things like that. They're there, they have been agreed, they're stable, and they can be a useful start. So you don't start from scratch here. Similarly, any finance-related question, you can first have a look at the finance help desk and then ask us if you can't find the answer. There are many, many issues related to EU funding and funding in general, budgeted questions can be found there, free. And again, you can ask for specific help by email and telephone in many languages. You get a response guaranteed in 3 working days. So these are structures that are not very well known, and people don't use them. Okay, final one, which I really would like to encourage you to look at, is the responsible guidelines. And these are not models how to partner, but guidelines on sort of the rules of the kitchen. What is where, in which cupboard, who does what kind of recipes can be used, and which kind of clients do we have in our restaurants. That is what this is about. And these have been agreed by these very large organizations, the EUA, which I mentioned before, the European University Association, the European Association of Research Technology Organizations, which are very much closely related to applied research. They have a lot of good knowledge base too. Proton Europe, which is the Association of Technology Transfer Offices. I was one of the founders of Proton Europe, so I can share things with you, and that was the reason why I was involved in this. And ERMA is the European Industry Research Managers Association. It's a little bit similar to SARIMA, except that the members are only all the big industries in Europe. Philips, Rolls-Royce, IBM, Nokia, those kind of industries. And they have their own good practice and sharing. And these guys together agreed on these principles. So this is shared good practice from both academia and industry. Very valuable as a start to help with negotiations. So the partnering handbook actually is, given the time, I will not go through the whole handbook. I have a copy. I will leave the copy with Dr. Foba with the whole package of the presentation. Download here the handbook if you really urgently needed it. Otherwise, you get the copy in the whole package from Dr. Foba. But really, it would be very interesting to, after you've seen the handbook and gone through it, what your first responses would be, and whether you think that you can contribute with good practice from Africa, because there's good practice in Europe, but nobody knows how to do this in the context of Africa. And that will be an enrichment for the next version. And I will be very interested to hear and collect feedback from you there. So, if you allow me, I skip this part of the discussion and we delay that offline by email later. And I go a little bit further. And that is recommendations. You can read it later yourself, but the base home is what I said earlier. Focus on value, focus on impact, use your resources optimally. So if you have limited resources, start small and then build that house over time. And focus on the right business model. Quite often, using with universities, they all think that you just sell one product or one invention or one patent to an industry and they will eventually pay you out. Well, maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe you should negotiate something for a short-term relationship and then get building money later in the longer term. Now, we talked yesterday about visibility, and there are many, many means of creating the visibility, not only through associations and products, but also through conferences, workshops, outreach in local communities, and talking to journalists. I mean, John and I were happy to talk to a few journalists here, but take any opportunity you can get. As you as faculty, dean, vice-chancellor, you have many opportunities to talk to journalists and increase that visibility consistently every time you get the chance. That helps your organization and the individual scientist to tap into bigger projects too. So you have your own role there too. Talk about your staff to potential international cooperation activities like the European Union, but there are many more. And get the information on calls on a flowing basis. I will give tomorrow a number of websites where you can find that information immediately, and that will be part of the presentation tomorrow, so you will have that at hand. And please distribute that to your staff so they can start working with it immediately. Well, the spin-off companies is the larger scale in the longer term, but certainly there are models, and we can be happy to discuss that later with you. Then, of course, measure the impact of the international activities in your university so that everybody, not only the scientists, but also the administration, is aware that these are very important strategic activities that should be completely supported, and that the scientists should not be left alone to get these projects inside the university, because in the end, the whole university benefits. And then, of course, link it to your strategy, which is always important, as I stressed many times over. Now, there are two elements that I would like to dig into a little bit deeper, and those are the Research Management Office in practice and the Technology or Knowledge Transfer Office in practice. What does that mean? What is their role? What do they do? And I would like to share once again one idea that is widely spread. People think in these linear terms. You have an idea, you write a grant, you obtain some money. If you have a prototype, you sell it to industry, they go to a bank, and you sell a product. This is a very linear way of thinking that has been in the past in America widely taught at the business schools. But this is an oversimplification of life. There's also a risk. As you may understand from my previous interventions now, that if you do this in a linear way, you depend on every single step of the money. If one of them fails, or if you make a mistake here, you will never have your product, and all the knowledge will be in the wastebasket. And you have to start all over again, and all the effort is lost. Now, if you work in networks, and you reuse the knowledge that is gained here in different ways for multiple grants, to develop multiple products or multiple research projects in different directions, then you gain much more value here, and then eventually more products will come out, and you spread the risk. And actually, to be honest, in biology, this is already happening everywhere. Everybody is part of networks. Networks in each individual disciplines, and they're all separate. And the trick of a larger research project is to connect those. Tap into the clinical validation network, tap into general information databases, tap into dry science laboratory, bioinformatics. Connect them together to provide a solution for a larger project. So use networks as a source of knowledge and assets. And so you're not working alone. It looks like a daunting task, as I said before, but you learn from your partners and you divide the tasks. Again, the orchestra, as I said yesterday, everybody has his own solo. Everybody has to give freedom to each other to once in a while play their leading role. And you need a director, a conductor, who gives direction. And that's you, in some instances, the project leader, who gives direction, solves his disputes, keeps a timeline so that the concert is ready for the audience, keeps the quality at the highest level so that the audience is satisfied, and they are your paying customers. No? No concert, no income, no musicians, no orchestra. Okay, so we live in a complex environment, and the world is rapidly changing, as we said yesterday, and this morning conclusions. We have to adapt. We cannot just say back, but we have to handle the risk there in a careful way. Now, research managers, as I said yesterday and this morning, are one way to actually help doing that, so that the scientists can focus not on the filling the forms, but can focus on doing their science. And working with projects looks like you assemble pieces and ingredients of a cake, put everything together, and then you serve the cake to your guests. But it's not that easy. Actually, there are a lot of things, really nitty-gritty things on the basis that the research managers have to solve, and that you're not even solving yourself at the faculty level or the dean level, but should be solved at the base level, working together with the administration. And that is where all the problems, as I said, occur. So it's about allocation, planning, follow-up, reporting of the projects, lots of paperwork, and take away that burden from the scientist. This you saw yesterday, that you saw yesterday. I only want to pose with two questions. Anybody, you recognize this? Communication problems like this, organizational problems, any comments, things missing here? Think about it. Yes, please. Before we go on, that will be valuable. Any improvements we can make?
Yeah, I think what is missing is personality conflict, where two of the partners don't seem to agree, and they fight among themselves. No, it's not communication. It's like they don't just, you put fire and kerosene together.
Do you recognize this? That is the question. Obviously we do, because yesterday we presented this, and we're talking of the need of communication among people in order to reach up to the expectations. And you're saying that normally if there's a lack of communication, if you do not take into consideration the culture of people, what people desire, and match with the organization, you are going to make a mess. And we do agree. I certainly. And later on, I'm going to ask another question, but not now. But if you're starting with question and answer sessions, can I go on? Okay, thank you very much. Il y a une autre question que je voulais poser, parce que nous apprécions tous les efforts que vous êtes en train de déployer en tant que personne pour que nous puissions avoir accès à l'organisation de la recherche. Et nous sommes nombreux qui nous sommes donné rendez-vous ici. Mais il y a un certain nombre de préoccupations qui nous sont également chères. La première, pourquoi depuis un certain temps, l'Union africaine n'est pas au centre de la problématique que vous êtes en train de développer? Nous avons reçu, il y a quelques mois, une délégation de l'association catalane des universités, et nous avons rassemblé des universités camerounaises, toutes les universités d'État, et un certain nombre d'institutions privées. C'était à Yaoundé au mois de décembre. Et nous avons abordé le management de la recherche. Et c'était aussi en rapport avec le financement de l'Union européenne. Et l'Union africaine n'y était pas associée. Et nous sommes pourtant en Afrique. La question revient, est-ce que la recherche qui est financée par l'Union européenne est à titre philanthropique? Ça, c'est une question que je voulais poser, c'est de manière générale. Mais sinon que, en tant qu'Africains, nous devons prendre position afin que nous ne puissions pas peut-être toujours attendre de l'Union européenne. Ça, c'est un point qui m'est cher. Et nous devons décider. À force de pouvoir tendre la main, on devient des esclaves. De l'autre côté, nous avons l'Union européenne, certes, l'Union africaine, c'est vrai, mais nous avons aussi l'espace asiatique. Et il me semble que nous devons chercher à mieux comprendre le financement de la recherche, non seulement dans un sens où nous serons en train de travailler avec l'Union européenne, ce qui est une bonne chose, mais en train de travailler aussi avec d'autres espaces. Et vous avez eu à dire que bon, telle chose, dans le sens de la perspective américaine, ce n'est pas bien. Et nous n'avons pas beaucoup de connaissances, mais nous disons que nous apprécions à juste titre tous les efforts que vous faites pour nous tenir par la main. Mais aussi, nous devons nous réveiller. Nous ne sommes pas en train de dire que nous sommes en train de sommeiller. Nous faisons des efforts. Il faut qu'on puisse faire à ce que les axes de coopération puissent être aussi établis. D'abord à l'interne, sur le plan africain, nous avons l'Union africaine. Et là, je ne m'adresse pas à vous en tant que tel. Vous êtes là pour nous aider. Mais je suis en train de m'adresser à moi-même et à nous tous ici. Je m'adresse aux autres espaces et à tous qui peuvent avoir des détails pour réagir. Merci beaucoup.
If you allow me, I can give a very short comment there. One is that I said before that for the European Union programs, specifically the Framework 7 programs, all partners in Africa, universities, companies, charities, NGOs, even the Union Africaine itself, can participate and receive money from the program. All legal entities are eligible. So there's no limit there, but of course they need to take action and participate, offer their expertise and become active. And there is the problem. Quite often they don't know that these programs are open. And as your second comment, they see it as a charity, only on the receiving end. European programs in the Framework 7 program are not charity money. They're not. That is why the European Union money is designed in this case, in this program, as an equal partnership for research. You have to contribute your knowledge and your unique assets, like databases, patients, unique knowledge about agricultural practices or languages and traditions. You need to share that with Europe. In return, you get some money and you are treated as an equal partner. That is not charity money. There are sub-programs for capacity building, and like the program that we are in under the ACP program is for capacity building. But the benefit is there that Africa is strengthened and can participate even more in the FP7 program as an equal partner and solve the problems here. And the third element is that the problems that we need to attack are the same. We have drought in Europe, we have immigration problems, we have infections that are coming from Asia and Latin America and Africa to Europe and vice versa. We have problems with culture, political problems that we cannot solve alone. I was giving the discussion with the Faculty of Arts there about culture, working in a bilingual country. We have our problems in Belgium with two languages and two regions that are fighting each other because of languages and cultural differences. So sharing expertise and possible solutions there, that is something that Europe is seeking here. That is not charity money. If you allow me to continue, we have further questions and answers later on. Yes? Thank you. Okay. So going back to the Research Management Office, activities are really, they do coordinate project partners and projects. They coordinate the research management and the administration, bring them together so that the administration is seamlessly working together with the scientist. And that may look like a dream, but it actually is the role of the Research Management Office to make that happen. And manage external financing either inside the university or, as I suggested, as one possible solution in an external body, and be in liaison between all those different departments and different entities. Really like a spider in a web, if you like. They have links to all the different facilities in the university. And then, of course, they help with process negotiation. They have an overview of the expertise in the whole university, and they deliver and manage the reports. So even if a scientist goes on, the knowledge is still there. And these are essential elements that can be kept. from each project. And this may not be a complete list. For certain projects, you may require other information to be recorded. But most general, for many projects, this is the kind of information that is actually recorded per project. Now, if you do that on a consistent basis in the Research Management Office, you build up a knowledge base in the university that is far more detailed than the annual report. So that is a very valuable thing for somebody outside to look at, okay, how can I collaborate with you? Okay? And then within within each project, not just the European projects, you have these phases where you collect the different elements of information. So not all information is collected at once. It's an ongoing dynamic process, and this knowledge base grows. So just use this as a checklist, if you like. Sorry, just to pinpoint here, contract and contract liabilities are reported. So if ever, years later, a conflict arises, you still have the record, and you can go back to the documentation. So in conclusion, yes, research managers are key because of this. And for you in executive management, council, deans, faculties, I don't know what your role is exactly in your place, use them as a sensing probe to detect problems early, to detect changes, to detect possibilities to grow. They're sort of independent between you in the top part of the government and the scientist in the bottom. And they can detect problem in one faculty that may not be occurring yet in another faculty. So that is another role that is less visible but extremely important to make cohesion in a university. And then, of course, they share best practices. If they have done a big project in one faculty, they can share that expertise with scientists in another faculty and get them on board on a big project next time. As I said, they have a map of who is using what and when. They have an idea of the legal consequences and what the IPR consequences could be. They do not have to solve the IPR consequences themselves. But at least they know which questions to ask and where to get the help externally. That, I really would like to stress that. It's not the devil does all, that the research manager solves all the problems. Well, that would be worse. It does happen sometimes that everybody dumps their problems on their desk. So you in the faculty should protect the research management office as well from such practices. So there's a balance and a real partnership, if you like. And as I said, have access to results and the value recognition. This is another overview, so I share a number of these checklists with you, and you use whatever is most appropriate in your own background. Quite often there is a division of different tasks at the top level and at the project level. So you will see quite often a research management office with centralized services or a central head of the office who takes care of certain functions, and then assistants or decentralized offices who take care of the small functions. And sometimes it's really like that. You have the bad guys and the guys that are less visible and less shouting, but they can be even worse in an organization. Okay, now briefly I go to the knowledge transfer office functions with a similar overview, just a few slides more to go, maybe 8 or so, to give you a glimpse of what is expected of a knowledge transfer office, which functions could be useful for you to choose from, and where to start. Because quite often they grow over time. A knowledge transfer office, there are some misconceptions about these. They're not for making money. And this is the old classical American approach. Let's sell our knowledge in licenses and earn big money from these private guys. That is not the purpose. And in fact, there has been a study from AUTM showing that even Caltech and MIT are barely covering the cost of their knowledge transfer office. Just 1 or 2 really big deals of $100 million, and all the rest are very, very, very small deals. So it's not a money generating, but it's about capturing talent, knowledge and value in and help with the process of dealing with knowledge sharing. That is the purpose of a knowledge transfer office. Okay. They should be very well trained in seeing where is the boundary of what you want to keep inside the university and what should be the sphere of partners outside, be it industry or other partners. And there you in faculty have a leading role to define that boundary. And it is a gray area. As we discussed earlier, you have this one project, that product that could be transferred. Where do you stop? Do you actually sell it to a company? You set up your own company? You actually invest money in that one company? Or you just leave it as is and then the scientist has to do everything alone? So that boundary is something that you have to discuss and discover exactly in each case where do you put the boundary, from how far do you want to go and can you go as a university, and when do you let it loose and give it in the hands of others. And it's really about building fences. I was talking about these gardens, and I like gardening very much, but we also know there are a lot of weeds, there are constant threats, not only from weeds but predators from outside, and not to mention the things that you cannot control, like the weather. So there are things that you cannot control in a university, and you should simply guard yourself against those. And there are things like building a fence, weeding and reaping and harvesting that you can control, and that is your task. And then the second question, which is quite often overlooked, is this question. What is the role you play? If you have a garden or a large garden, do you sell the wood to somebody who makes wheels? And with the wheels, you can actually bring the products and fruits to the market. How far do you go? Do you sell the products on the market yourself, or you let somebody else do that? So this is just a reminder for yourself to start thinking about that. And that may be different in one faculty than another. Obviously, in the arts faculty, you may have a different boundary than in the humanities or the human social sciences or in hardcore engineering. I will skip this one because I will explain it tomorrow. It's rather about financing. And then a final checklist, really, to define the roles of the functions of the knowledge transfer office. And people need to be trained according to these roles, really, to assist, to facilitate, to provide a relationship with the council and the top executives so that the strategy of the university is actually implemented. They are key there. They're key. Sorry. As I said, there are many different models, and I would like to keep the discussion here together with the last point. So we squeeze all the questions and answers down in one. But please keep in mind that there are many different models of doing this. You can put all the research management and technology transfer in one office. Everybody, all the functions as the one-stop shop for the entire university. Or you can use a distributed function. Every single faculty has a completely autonomous structure that works in some universities. But you have to make sure that there is some kind of coherence and communication between them. You have the hub and spoke model where you have centralized services that are very key to the entire university and project management level services that are in each faculty. And I've heard already speaking about this particular model for a university where I don't know what the strategy will be, but I can share with you examples how that is done in other universities. And then you can have separate centralized offices, either in-house or out-house, completely externalized on a non-profit basis, as is done in Latin America and Russia, or even on a for-profit basis, as is done in some universities in the UK and Germany. And these can be extremely profitable and very good and efficient, high quality, but they are less linked to the scientists and to the faculty deans. So this is a very relevant discussion slide I would encourage you to take home and discuss with your colleagues, because there are so many different models, even network models on a regional basis, like in Heidelberg, or the example I gave you from Flanders. So if you're interested in more details on any of these models, please get back to me and my colleagues in the project, and then we could take it from there. So you don't have to invent everything, but please think about the possibilities there. There's a whole landscape. And then it relates to the time of the development of such offices, because they don't start from scratch. You start with one person, you divide certain roles that you share with existing staff who have a second function because they have some experience, and then slowly you merge that into one of these models. So it depends on the time where you are, the development of funds available, and the capacity or expertise of your staff. It depends on the size of the activities. For example, in human science, in health care, you need far more investments in infrastructure than in the arts and the social sciences. So you need more structure and funds and management than in the smaller activities. So it depends on the type of activities too, whether it's related to education and training or pure basic research or contract research with industry. Here, obviously, you have more needs for negotiation skills, intellectual property. It can be a great source of funding, industry, but you have to build the internal expertise to deal with that. And then, of course, if there's special infrastructure. Thinking of a university in Belfast has 2 big biofermenters of each 15,000 liters where they can test out bioprocesses. But in order to build that facility, that takes a serious investment, and they use only a quarter of the time. So they can share that facility with other universities as a shared, centralized facility. Of course, you need a contract for that. Having that facility attracts new projects, but you need to manage that. So that is special infrastructure, and that relates back to overhead and indirect costing too. We will get into that tomorrow. And then, of course, the cultural constraints. Like in Mexico, we had this huge discussion about we are not going to commercialize any of us because this is taxpayer money in research. It should be free for all. Well, the reality may be a little bit more nuanced. Some areas, yes, other areas, maybe no. So that depends on the culture in your university, how ready people are to make these changes. It's very hard to force it on them. You can encourage. Last 2 slides on training and education needed for the research management and knowledge transfer office staff. In IARMA, the European Association Research Managers that I headed, we did a survey years ago, 8-9 years ago, on the training needs. And we found that if you go consistently from step 1 to step 10, from project management conception, looking at what competitors and projects have been done already, to selection of opportunities, finding partners, writing proposals, converting it into actual projects, grants, negotiating here, implementation of the project, management, administration, and finally using the results. That whole process. You need different skills at different stages. And this map was like a summary of the kind of skills that were needed. People interactive skills were needed, especially in the first place, to get people together, partners together, to explain the scientist to non-technical people, or partners who have a different scientific discipline. So we designed a number of workshops specifically on that. How do you explain what you're doing in non-technical terms? And then we had strategy development workshops that had elements like what I presented today. Well, why do you want to do this project? And how can we build on that project in the future? And then during getting the grant and converting it into a contract, you need contracts, legal skills, negotiation skills, but also involve the financial skills. Budgets need to be monitored, worked out in detail. We will do an exercise tomorrow. And then in the closure, you need almost all these skills to transfer the knowledge and use that. So you need different kind of training in different stages. And research management or technology transfer office can actually develop over time these skills. Just be aware of the scale. And we actually have been working on a general curriculum to teach these skills. And some of these skill trainings might be present in your social sciences and management faculty. Some of them you may want to get from abroad. So think about those, and you can tap on each of those. We have a curriculum descriptions. This is based on European surveys, and you may want to add your African needs there. And you may need to say, well, we need much more of this and much less of that. And that is the kind of feedback we would like to hear. And in the larger framework of INORMS, the international network of research management associations, there in April we found in South Africa there's a livid discussion to actually think about this on a global scale, maybe exchange curriculum, exchange good practice from Australia and Canada and Europe and America. So you can tap in those resources if you have an association here and send out people, be trained there. So that is my last slide really, to ask about the priorities here. Is there anything missing and anything in the scale of career development of people that you can think about and take into account in these training workshops and work plans in your university? Because people do not stay forever in one job. They sort of navigate in that whole landscape, as I did in my career, moving from science to business management to being entrepreneur to now talking to you here. So the last few are a couple of recommendations you can read out later yourself. And really, it's about social skills. So with that, I would like to open the final question and answer sessions and then not keep you away too long before dinner. And I hope nobody's fallen asleep after this long presentation. Thank you very much for bearing with us. And open floor for questions, please.
Thank you. Yeah, no, again, thanks very much for another stimulating and thought-provoking presentation. Just a small question on the postgraduate training for RMO. At what level is this? Is this at a formal level? Is it, for instance, masters in research management? Or is a concoction which is meant to enable without giving a formal degree?
Good question. There's no answer. No, really, we have done this debate in Europe for many years, and every single person you ask will give a different answer. Because some institutes would like to have a master's degree, others say, no, we need research into these methodologies because this is an unknown field. This is not being taught at the business school, so we don't even know what we are talking about. It's all practice only. Yes, but then you need trained researchers in the methodologies of research management, and that's a new field, and there's very little practice in the research. There are very few publications. To be honest, John mentioned Research Global and some other publications within ACU. These are rare. There are few publications like that, a few journals, but very, very few actual research going on in this field. So it would be very valuable to train people to get into those management research fields and develop skills that are maybe more consistent across different institutes and countries. There may be also policy issues driving for simple workshops instead of certifications and PhDs. So it depends on the country and the institute you're talking about. And I have not seen any consistency in this across the world, to be honest. So that is one of the elements in the discussion we had in April in Cape Town with INORMS members. We would like to discuss on a global forum like INORMS, what is the emphasis or the approach in Australia? What are the approaches in the UK versus the ones in Finland, in France, in Belgium, versus in Canada and Australia, in America and in Africa, and see whether we can share. And then each country can make their own decision whether they want to make it a fully certified, accredited job career, or whether it's built up through a patchwork of workshops, as is quite often done now. Any other questions, please, contributions?
In your experience, since you've had quite a diversity of experience from different countries, I've looked at the different research management frameworks that you had given. Do you have do you have good practices? Which of these, I think there are about 6, seem to have worked well? That's one. The second thing is, I've heard very little about policy. And I think that it is fundamental in how we steer the entire environment for research. Because, you have not said much. What role does the policy plays in shaping all of this, which I think is fundamental?
I agree with you. I did that on purpose. Very much on purpose, and I'll tell you why. Okay. Exactly the same answer I gave to Isaac, is that every single country will have their own environment, making their own policies. What I did here, or tried to do, is give you the elements to which you can make your own choices and policies, and then implement them. Because for me, and this is a personal remark, the policies are very essential, but they should not stop there.
Yes,
but the value is in the implementation.
Okay, I thought that in your, when you said we should comment on the management, what that other, for that really, I think at the last one where we had it's a purple background with arrows and project management.
This one?
No. Yes.
P4, project management. P4.
Yes. Again. Keep going. Yes. Here.
Oh, there's one.
I thought there should be policy. I don't know how we can shape it. Maybe it cannot be poor policy or whatever policy. But I think in that cultural environment, that policy should be there, because it is a it can be, and it usually is a stumbling block. Because that was one. The other thing was, I don't know whether we should say which one comes first, but I see as critical the research management itself. That as long as they don't have the capacity, I think the vision for the rest of the other antennas in the faculty is in jeopardy. So I see that niche as the real core. Without which leadership is, and because sometimes even when you could have a good input from the faculty, because it's not aligned with the central management, it becomes a problem. Thank you.
Thank you for giving that comment. I appreciate that, because indeed, indeed, the policy can be a stumbling block, and it's complicated to put in that slide, and I will give it a try, I promise you, because policy is not just on one level. You have the government policy, you have the institute policy, and you have the research charter or the ethics policies that are sort of in between, interfering. Let me think about it, and I will try to make an effort. The second thing is that what you mentioned, I think is very important, is that if the individual functions are not aligned with the strategy, So the communication line to the executive council level or the executive level, management level, then you will have not a coherent structure. And that is very important for this choice. Because depending on the structure and the communication line in your organization, you will have to choose which model works best. If it's fully distributed, it's fully outsourced, or it's like a hub and spoke where you have some communication lines to central services and other things are closer to the scientist. And that will be really the key part where you start thinking from how do we design these functions. And then the next slide is about how to grow them over time. And I promise you, every single university will have a different model. We see that in Europe as well. For example, CNRS in France, very large organization, very, very large. INSERM, same thing. Research institutes that are distributed over many different universities and cities. They have a distributed model where only very, very few centralized management services are done. Still, there is some coherence, but it's such a large distributed organization, they have no choice. While other organizations, mainly UK universities, have very centralized services. In Finland, for example, the University of Helsinki is an excellent model. Have a look at those. But they have the one-stop shop central service. One shop with almost 30 people with different disciplines, going from law to engineering to IT to business development. They have industrialists working there. They can build spin-off companies, and they do on a regular basis, but the same office administers all the project grants and the international exchange fellows. So they have a process there that is extremely efficient, and with 35 people they manage the whole university. And everybody knows all the information is there. Another good example is University of Heidelberg, where they collaborate with other universities in the same region. And they have kept some services inside the university, but the really spin-off activity that demand more commercial activity, they have it in the region with the several universities together. And that way they were able to ask banks to invest with risk money, and they have a seed fund. Not a single university could have get such a big seed fund, but together they have enough critical mass. And final model, University of Polytechnical Valencia in Spain. It's a polytechnical university closer to engineering, closer to industry. They have a fantastic record of spin-off companies and contract research. With maybe 30 people, they handle more than 600 contracts with industry, and they do it extremely efficient, and they have even a software platform that helps to do and track all the records. So those are universities you should be maybe in contact with, and if possible, exchange and staff exchange. Send somebody to those universities to the office, let them learn the environment, get them back, and then they can be helped to set up your own office here. That's probably the best advice I can give. Yes, please. Yes, please.
Dr. Fombe of University of Boya. I have this question related to the competitive nature of funding institutions. Mm-hmm. And in that light, you suggested that cooperation is one way for researchers to be able to build their capacities and be able to make a good proposal. I have this apprehension because there are young researchers probably in some universities who are unable to identify partners in some other universities to be able to work with, to cooperate with, and be able to come up with very lofty projects that can be competitive. Though this forum has as an objective to establish one of such opportunities, like we were already calling it the Karima, whereby our university can liaise with some other universities of the region. But it becomes a little bit very difficult, and given the fact that there are some of these websites which are not accessible to be able to create that opportunity for young researchers to get that information base. How can we solve this kind of a problem?
There are several ingredients there that could help. One, you mentioned the association, and hopefully 2 years from now we will see Karima active and giving support, etc. I'm really hoping for that. The association can distribute news, possible partners, organizations, conferences, activities, and open calls to the different universities, so that not every university has to collect that information alone. Be more effective together. Second thing is that linking young researchers with much more senior professors is of course the obvious first step, because the senior professors have the networks, they know what are good partners. The only limitation to that is that most of the professors are, and I'm generalizing here, have networks in their own discipline. And to find partners in complementary disciplines, that is the biggest task. And I think there the Research Management Office should be most active to help support, to give these young researchers a chance to go to conferences, to meet people from other disciplines, to invite people from successful projects abroad to give presentations here, so that the young investigators are exposed to projects that are successful. I don't know, there's so many individual steps you can take to encourage young entrepreneurs, but they have to get out of their lab, that's for sure. The list of websites that I will give tomorrow is just one start, but at least you can use those. But yes, visiting conferences, visiting partners who have already different disciplines in their consortium, talking to senior professors. That's the way I could suggest, but maybe somebody else had better suggestions. Everybody is asleep. Well, me too. Maybe I can suggest we close it for today. It was a very long day, and I thank you very much for the level of attention you have maintained up to now. Thank you very much, and hope to see you tomorrow.